Start off this NFC North preview with the Chicago Bears and Dalton. This is a team that has missed the playoffs 4 years in a row now. So Matt Eberflus was let go as the head coach, and they brought in Ben Johnson, the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator, who's been like the hottest coaching candidate for the last couple years now. He will now be the new head coach in Chicago with Caleb Williams in year 2 of Caleb Williams too. Let's look at what they did this offseason. The Bears got a B+ for the NFL draft this offseason, getting guys like Colston, Loveland, and Luther Burden III on that offense. And then also we gave them an A- for free agency too, because they really rebuilt that offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right now when you look at this team, it's projected to be the biggest strength. Now they've got 3 new pieces in Drew Dalman at center, Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson at guard. Got 2 of those guys via trades and Dalman in free agency. And I think now when you look at this team, it at least on paper could be a top 5 offensive line in the league. The front 5 of Jones, Thuney, Dalman, Jackson, and Darnell Wright at right tackle, that could be a dominant unit. And we know that's Ben Johnson's vision, right? It's the same vision they had in Detroit when they had the best offensive line in football for the last 3 years. You know, you had a dominant offensive line. They could run block. They could get heavy in the play action game with their passing game. They were solid in pass protection. So I think when Ben Johnson came in this offseason and he wanted to build this team in his vision, it started in the trenches. It made a couple of defensive line acquisitions, obviously, also. But this offensive line, he wants it to be the heartbeat of this football team, just like it was in Detroit. And I think he's gone a long way towards making that happen.
Yeah, it's our number 4 offensive line in football heading into the 2025 season, and really it was probably a bottom 10 at least offensive line last year, but then adding those 3 interior offensive linemen to already 2 solid tackles they have there too makes it one of the best O-lines in football. The one weakness really on this offense, I will say, is probably running back. You know, they had a need at running back in free agency and the draft last year. Didn't do much to help that out. They drafted Kyle Monungai in the 7th round, who I thought could have been taken higher than the 7th round of the draft, but probably he's still a day 3 pick at best. So they're only 26th in rushing grade last year, and they were last in yards after contact per attempt. So DeAndre Swift's still there. Roschon Johnson is still there too. And maybe with a better offensive line in front of them, they'll be better next year, because we see all time and time again that offensive line is so critical for how good a team's run game is. And Chicago's wasn't very good last year, but now it's a top 5 offensive line in football. So maybe this year will be better. But I still think running back is a need on this team. And I think for a lot of Bears fans, they'll be watching a lot of Notre Dame football games this year with Jeremiah Love as potentially the only first-round running back in the 2026 NFL draft. I could see him being the final piece for Ben Johnson and his offense. That's not happening until next April, Dalton. So I think this year running back is still kind of a problem for Chicago.
Yeah, no, and Swift had his most efficient season in his last year in Detroit under Ben Johnson. You've got Roschon Johnson. You've got Kyle Monungai, like you mentioned. I think it is going to be a rotation, and the hot hand is going to get reps. But I think it's going to start out with the veteran Swift. And look, the modern theory for the most part, outside of a few special running backs, has been, look, build the offensive line, and you could put a lot of running backs back there, and they could produce at least the league average level. That's what they're hoping for. And I do think Ben Johnson got it right when it comes to building the offensive line first.
Agreed.
I just expected them maybe to take it back maybe a little earlier in the draft in the 7th round. But if they like Monungai and they like him in that rotation, then so be it, along with Swift and Johnson.
Definitely. So tell me more about Caleb Williams, who was relatively disappointing as a rookie. But again, it wasn't a great situation for him last year, either with the coaching or the offensive line in front of him. So what should we expect in year 2 from him under Ben Johnson?
So, I mean, Caleb Williams was the victim last year of being, was it the 3rd or 4th straight quarterback to walk into a Bears situation that essentially had a lame duck coach, and they wound up firing him after their first year, right? So I think when you look at Caleb Williams last year, it was not great play calling. The accuracy was shaky. And the thing I was worried about most when he was coming out of USC was, is he going to throw the ball on time at the NFL level? We know him to be one of the best improvisers. He's one of the best improvisers we've ever seen in college football, but you can't improvise your way through an entire season, right? So I think the big thing for me with Caleb is learning to throw the football on time. How long will it take him to adjust to Ben Johnson's system? Last year, Max, out of 41 qualified quarterbacks, when throwing in rhythm, Caleb Williams was 32nd in passing grade, right? So it's just that part of it. Now, his turnover-worthy play rate wasn't too bad, but that's also because there were moments where the misses were so bad we couldn't even chart him as turnover-worthy plays. So he's got to get better in rhythm. Ben Johnson's even said as much. There are things in this offense, certain checks, and even playing under center that he just hasn't done as much throughout his entire life. There's things in this offense he hasn't done in his entire career, high school, college, NFL, wherever. So it's going to be kind of a new learning curve. I don't want to say it's a second rookie season, but in this offense is going to be so much to learn. And the crucial part for the Bears season is getting him to play on time and just making throws on time.
Definitely. I can't wait to watch him in year 2 under Ben Johnson, who's a very creative offensive coordinator. And he was very creative with Jared Goff, who's not a very creative quarterback outside of structure. Who knows what it looks like this year with Caleb Williams, who is, based off college tape at least, is excellent. Outside of structure, too. The offensive player spot, we could have gone with a number of guys here. Honestly, Joe Thuney is one of the best guards in football, our number 2 guard in the league. Drew Dalton, our number 5 center in the league as well. And Dalton's a perfect fit in that outside zone-heavy scheme that Ben Johnson runs. I wanted to talk about an underrated player on this offensive line, though. That is Darnell Wright, who is quickly becoming one of the better right tackles in football. He had a 79.3 PFF grade last year. The only right tackles in the NFL with a better PFF grade than him were Penei Sewell, Lane Johnson, and Zach Tom. Those are 3 outstanding right tackles that we have in football, and Darnell Wright was only behind those 3 right there. He was very good as a zone blocker, too, an 89.9 zone blocking grade. That was 7th among all tackles in the league last year. Still a very, very young player as well. I think Darnell Wright, like I said, is becoming one of the star right tackles that we have in football right now. And in another year here as a young player, he could emerge as one of the better overall tackles in the league.
Absolutely. He was the Bears' highest graded offensive player last year. He's been incredibly durable through his first 2 seasons, playing well over 1,000 snaps. And that last part that you mentioned about the zone blocking, it's something I've talked about with Drew Dalton at center, especially the athleticism on this offensive line. If Ben Johnson's going to run outside zone at a top 5 rate like he did in Detroit, this is going to be a lot of fun when it comes to running the football, no matter who's back there in the backfield, because they're going to have open lanes to work with. I think Darnell Wright is absolutely a star in the making, just to be mentioned in the conversation with those other guys that you named ahead of him. He's well on his way to stardom, and I think he's just as important a piece as all of those acquisitions they made up front.
A guy who's already a star in the NFL, though, Dalton, is Jaylon Johnson, who's, according to us, a top 5 corner in football right now.
Absolutely. The Bears' secondary, their coverage unit, has really been the best part of their defense the last couple of years, and that's because Jaylon Johnson's one of the best cornerbacks in football. There was a slight drop-off last year from an incredible 2023, but he's still the second highest graded corner in the entire NFL behind Trent McDuffie over the last 2 seasons. Jaylon Johnson at corner, he's one of those guys that allows you to do whatever you want to do on defense, and I think Dennis Allen is going to be much more aggressive, playing a lot more man coverage, blitzing a lot more than Matt Eberflus did under the previous defense. So you look at what Jaylon Johnson allows you to do in the secondary and how much better he makes your entire defense because of that ability to play one-on-one. He's really the cornerstone of the secondary.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of him. He's been an outstanding player ever since his rookie year, honestly, too. So big fan of him and a big fan of their first-round pick, too, the number 10 overall pick. That was Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan, who's the rookie to watch here for Chicago. Bears tight ends last year were 30th in receiving grade, so the 3rd worst receiving grade among all tight ends last year. And Colston Loveland over the last couple of years is the 4th best receiving grade with a 90.8 receiving grade at Michigan. And really in 2024, it wasn't a very good situation for him at Michigan. He was really the only offensive player worth game planning for opposing defenses, and he was still very, very good last year for the Wolverines. And I think he and that Ben Johnson scheme alongside Cole Kmet too, who's still in that offense, I think a lot of 12 personnel you could see next year in Chicago. And I think Colston Loveland, again, it wasn't one of the names that was talked about for Chicago like running back or edge rusher too, but I think Colston Loveland will be a very fun player for Caleb Williams to play with this offense.
Yeah, any of the questions about them taking Colston Loveland over Tyler Warren, who went 14th to the Colts, I think it's a matter of fit, right? Cole Kmet's an old school traditional tight end who can play inline. Colston Loveland fits right in. He played in a lot of 12 personnel at Michigan, so he's used to kind of this kind of flex role, right, where he can play in the slot, he can play outside, he can play inline with Kmet. I think when it comes to Loveland and his versatility and what he adds to this team receiving-wise, their tight ends had the 3rd worst receiving grade in the NFL last season. This is just the type of player they were looking for. Time will tell if Loveland or Warren is the better player, but I think when it comes to the style that Loveland plays with, this is what Ben Johnson preferred, and I think it's a fantastic pick. He's a seamless fit.
I can't wait to watch him next year. The best bet of the year from our betting guru, Ben Lindsay, is Rome Odunze to have over 1,000 receiving yards in 2025 in his second year. You can get it for plus 225 right now on DraftKings Sportsbook. His reasoning is Ben Johnson recently said that Rome Odunze fits the prototypical X receiver mold, and Ben's really expecting a year 2 leap from him in what should be a more efficient passing offense. We were big fans of Rome Odunze last year. He was one of the 10 best prospects in the 2024 draft. He had over 700 receiving yards as a rookie last year, and we think he should go over 1,000 receiving yards in his second season.
Yeah, over 700 yards and was on the field all the time. And think about all the difficulties that this team had throwing the football last year. There were times, especially Odunze was kind of the victim of the lack of rhythm in the offense and the lack of accuracy from Caleb Williams. And it really centers around Caleb Williams, right? If he's a lot better, then Odunze's numbers are going to be a lot better. So at plus 220, I don't hate that at all because of how talented we know Odunze is. And I know they have DJ Moore there right now, but Odunze is expected to be their number 1 wide receiver of the future. If that starts this year, that's a very attainable number.
Definitely. All right, so the Bears win total is set right now by DraftKings at about 8.5 right now. Over 8.5 plus 115, under is minus 135. Do you think they go over or under, and what's the bottom line for this team, and do you think this is potentially a playoff team in the NFC North?
I remember it being that same number last year, and I was hard on the under. I was very much like they haven't proven anything yet. This is a much closer one because, I mean, there's several factors in it. One is just straight up Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson. How does that sync up? 2, it is an incredibly hard division. We're about to talk about the other 3 teams, and they all made the playoffs last year, and they're not getting a whole lot worse, right? The over-under pick is tough for me. They do have the potential, though. They can make the playoffs. I've said it. I think this is the most wide-open division where, more than any other, all 4 teams have a chance to win it. If Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, if they get the chemistry going early and Williams is a lot better throwing on time, this is a potentially dynamic offense. You've got 2 solid tight ends. You've got 3 solid receivers. You've got a top 5 offensive line. You've got a defense that, to me, it's probably not an elite unit, but there's enough players at all 3 levels that they can support this offense. So I will even tell you that the ceiling is that they could win this division. They just have the largest gap to make up, especially when it comes to their quarterback improving from last year. I think it's a very wide range of outcomes. I was not optimistic on the Bears going into last year. This year, they're better coached. They have a better offensive line. I think there's a lot more potential for them to be in this postseason race.
Yeah, better coach, better offensive line, more weapons to play with for Caleb Williams, too, with Luther Burden and Colston Loveland coming in through the draft, too. I think I'm going to say this is going to be about an 8 or 9 win team. I'll probably say 9 and 8. I'll say maybe not make the playoffs in 2025, but if Caleb Williams can live up to the number 1 overall pick hype he had coming out of USC a couple years ago, and we've seen time and time again, rookie years for quarterbacks are usually a struggle. And then year 2, when they get more comfortable, is when they make a jump. If we see that kind of jump for Caleb Williams in year 2, this absolutely could be a playoff team because the supporting cast room in Chicago is much, much better than what it was in his rookie year. So I think, that you could see that Chicago surprise some people, make the playoffs next year. So I'll say about a 9 and 8 team right now.
I think the one thing that needs to be said, because I know there's going to be playoff expectations this year in Chicago, they don't have to make the playoffs for this necessarily to be considered a successful year. Obviously, you would like to, and the division's super competitive, and you'd like to make it over the Vikings or the Packers or whoever. But I think it's this 50-50. They're not a developmental team because they have a lot of talent, but also it's really a year where you want to see Caleb Williams look like the franchise guy. It's almost the same expectation as last year's. We want to see him look like a franchise quarterback. He didn't look like that for a lot of last year. If he can do that this year, even if they just get squeaked out from the playoffs, then I still think that's a successful year and something to build on.